So here we have a map of the United States and Canada and Mexico, and we are going to use this map to discuss where the United States specifically, where we get our air masses from and what gives those air masses their properties. You can see that some of these air masses are actually formed over water and some of them are formed over land. The ones that get formed over water, we refer to those air masses as being maritime. And the ones that are formed over land, we refer to those as being what we call continental air masses. You can see that over Canada, there's two continental air masses that are pretty prominent, and over Mexico, there's one that is continental. And then over the North Pacific, there's an air mass, and over the North Atlantic, there's an air mass. And then you can also see that there is an air mass that's in the South Pacific as well as in the South Atlantic over the Gulf of Mexico. So how do we label these? Well, each one of these air masses gets a label based on whether it's formed over land or water, or whether it is cold or warm. And obviously we think of air masses that come from to the north of the United States, we think of those as generally being cold. So the words we use for cold, we actually use the word polar. And if anything is below North America or below the United States, we tend to call that tropical. So each one of these air masses, we're going to give a name based on whether it is wet or dry, or whether it is cold or warm. This one up here in the North Pacific, we're going to call this maritime polar, meaning it was formed over water and it's cold. Over here in northern Canada, we're going to call this one continental polar because it's formed over the continent and cold. Same with this one here. And then this air mass in the North Atlantic, we're also going to call this one maritime polar. And then we come down to the south, and you can see the one that's formed in the South Pacific, we're going to call this one maritime tropical, big T. This one's going to be continental tropical, and this one's going to be also maritime tropical. From the looks of the arrows, the arrows kind of indicate where the air masses, as a general rule, where they will flow when they hit the United States. And you can see there's pretty much a trend, just like globally, where the air flows pretty much from the west to the east. The front end of these air masses, of course, are called fronts. That's where that term comes from. And so if we were to actually kind of highlight the front end of this air mass, I could kind of sketch it like this. That would be the front end of that body of air that takes on those properties, and in this case, that being maritime polar, that would be wet and cold. And you can see that that a lot of these air masses kind of run into each other. The arrows are hard to see here, but this one right here, this continental tropical air mass, meets this continental polar air mass, and it kind of meets right in the middle of the United States. And if you've been around for a while, you know that the middle of the United States is well known for its tornadoes. Whenever this is a really, really, really cold air mass and this is a really, really warm air mass, and they meet in the middle of the United States, it is quite possible for the cold air mass to be on top of the warm air mass, and it traps the warm air below. And as the warmth continues, eventually that warm air is going to punch through the cold air mass, and that's when you can get a tornado developing there. This whole area is what's known as Tornado Alley. So, like I said, as a general rule, because of the Earth's rotation, we generally get our weather from these air masses as they sweep down across the United States. Whenever we get a hurricane, it's obviously an air mass that's formed down here, and we call those cyclones.